What do we have here? Scourge Arrow skill reveal, upcoming divination cards, and also delve frequently asked questions. So this I haven't seen. I've seen some of the frequently asked questions, but not too much. But I suppose the Scourge Arrow is the somewhat more interesting thing right now. So let's go over it. Let's look at what this is going to be looking like. Okay. Oh, wow. I think that was chain, right? Damn. Seems pretty cool. Looks rather consistent. Let's see what we've got. Brand new channeled bow skill, the first of its kind, called Scourge Arrow. First of its kind, maybe more. Scourge Arrow converts 60% of physical damage to chaos. Oh, wow. Okay. Making it a strong pick for builds that want to capitalize on the upcoming changes to poison passive skills, the changes to the Pathfinder Sensei, and the new support gem for chaos-based attacks, Withering Touch. All of which are planned to launch alongside Delve expansion. Wow. Wow. Okay. Interesting scaling, very unlike bow abilities, because bows always have been like hit slow but hit hard. Then they turned into hit a lot but can't scale with anything even remotely physical related compared to like the LE skills because of Bestials. And this one will be charge fast, which means a lot of attack speed, and then hit many times, I suppose. It's interesting. It's definitely got a nice feel to it, I would imagine. I love that. That sounds really good. Right. So you can see the spores. Kind of hard to tell initially. Damn, honestly, if it does enough damage, it seems incredibly powerful. Because it's very unusual type of scaling. And something that players didn't really get an opportunity to delve into too much. It is delayed, which is tricky, but it also seems to have a lot of AoE, and for the most part, it synergizes pretty well with like the current maps as long as it doesn't do anything stupid interacting with walls. So, I don't know, I'm pretty optimistic. It's definitely, again, got that cool feel of boom boom boom, which I really like, and it converts to chaos, which is a big question mark. And then yeah, they're also highlighting the Pathfinders getting revamped, and Withering Touch is going to be a thing. I don't know what that is. And the poison passive skills too, which is extra interesting because I think to a lot of people approaching poison currently in the game, I'd say the bigger issues are with the mechanic at its core rather than the passives on the skill tree, which for the most part seem rather powerful, but at least numerically, but aren't good enough either way. So maybe this is like a easier way of them to control where they want to take poison in the future, as it does tend to be a mechanic that either absolutely sucks or is completely ridiculous, as there's a big difference for poison killing things in maps versus poison killing a boss. It's a pretty big difference there, so it's a hard thing to balance. So maybe this will open up new opportunities, maybe something focusing on surrounding targets and whatnot, more damage if there's targets around, less damage if there's whatever, right? I don't know. I'm interested in what they've got planned. How common is Voltaxic Sulfurite? It's in every area, sometimes multiple deposits of it. Multiple? Oh, okay. That seems a lot more than what I was expecting. Is there a minimum amount of Voltaxic Sulfurite needed to enter the mine? There's a minimum amount of Voltaxic Sulfurite required to get the crawler to go to a new location, but it's quite small for short delves. Looking for those short delves to get a new record. Is there a capacity on how much Voltaxic Sulfite you can carry? Yes, and you can upgrade this with Azurite if you feel it's too low. Well, this doesn't answer anything. How much can you upgrade it? Hello? Endlessly? Is there a cap? Well, yes, but also no. Okay. How long can you spend in the mines assuming you have filled your voltaxic sulfide capacity? This depends on the number of factors, but with reasonable capacity upgrades at a reasonable depth, you can chain a few longer delves together if you want to consume all your voltaxic sulfide at once. Okay, that sounds pretty reasonable. Yeah, I'd like for it to be more than a few. I'd like to, like, do a bunch of this and do a bunch of that. In terms of mapping and then delves, something that I really enjoy about the flashback races is that if you've got an atlas that's focused on shape maps, what you can really do is, you know, for an hour I do these maps, for an hour I do those maps. Oh, there's no mod that I'm particularly looking at for that hour, I can just mix and match them. I really like that quite a bit more than for it to just step in, and it might just feel a little bit too much like Incursion, where yeah, I ran it, but then it wasn't quite enough. But then again, we don't really know how long a delve really is. They say longer delves, but what is that? Is that a minute? Is that 5 minutes? Is it 10? You don't really know, and you don't really know what's at the end of it either, so it's kind of hard to make a call. Can I bypass leveling in other areas of the game and spend most of my time exclusively in the mine? No! You have to play the regular game to get voltaxic sulfide so that you can play delves. I mean, to be expected, but I think a lot of people had their hopes up about this. Not me, I love leveling. Azurite can be spent upgrading your mining equipment, sulfide capacity, darkness resistance, light radius to offset the growing difficulty of deeper levels, as well as upgrades for flares, capacity, radius, duration, and dynamite, capacity, radius, the capacity, damage, radius. Interesting, because they say darkness resistance, which technically would indicate that since you've got a darkness resistance thing, they probably wouldn't want that to scale too far. Otherwise, maybe the near the surface delves that can potentially be pretty rewarding just won't be dealing enough damage to create a threat for players with enough of this, and therefore the sulfide capacity upgrade might also be a thing, but it's an endlessly scaling dungeon, so for the resources to be not scaling that far, very, very interesting. I really wonder what they're gonna do with this. Hopefully it won't create some sort of imbalance where, yeah, people are just gonna be chilling out at the around the top of the delves and just, yeah, farming up. But maybe it's gonna be a cool way to farm up for like bottom delves too, because obviously the more capacity you've got, the better, the easier it's going to be to run multiple of the higher delves, and then you can maybe farm more Azurite. I don't know. I'm sure there's going to be something with that. I just wouldn't like for it to be imbalanced. Can you teleport to any checkpoint in Azurite mine? Yes, like the waypoint system. Oh, I wonder how spread out those are. The crawler progress is tied to the owner of the mine. If that person leaves, then the crawler stops and the party will not be able to proceed. What? That's OP, dog! You can just chain them then, in between party members? Fuck. Can you run the same delve twice? Each delve can only be run once because the encounter is rewarding, but you can return to the area you cleared to hunt in the darkness with flares afterwards. Oh, cool. The path that you have previously delved along is now lit by a cable of lights laid by the crawler. Oh. Damn, that's cool. I mean, I like things like that because it always gives you the choice of, am I speedy boy and progressing further, or am I taking my time doing this and then rerunning it again? Anything that creates the risk versus reward scenarios for players is always something that I look forward to. Is there a ladder for both solo and group play? Yeah, so initially they had a little bit of a different idea, I heard, but then they clarified it. So feedback from the community so far has suggested that you would like a separate ladder that tracks solo delves in these trade-enabled leagues. Absolutely, man. It's such a massive difference between character to character. I mean, certain characters are going to work better in the party, certain characters will work worse in another party. And since we've got descendancy and class differences, yeah, We need that shit. I need that shit. In order for you to resume scoring your solo delves, you have to make depth progress on some numbers. 10-ish of delves with no party members. Ah, cool. Okay. If you want to play in a league that doesn't have any possible influence from other players, consider playing SSF. Makes sense to me. I think that is absolutely the better approach, but I do wonder what they... yeah. I wonder how the catch-up mechanic's gonna work then. Will there be global announcements when players reach new depths in the mine? Probably. Probably? We have announcements for Johnny John has entered the sewer of Grandma when people are like 99 when they're entering a side zone, but we wouldn't have an announcement for this? Come on, GGG. That's not a probably for me. It's a definitely. Hello? It's like whenever you're racing and then you're like level 99 fucking pushing ladder, you're popping off, and then suddenly it's like, oh, this dude has entered a 3v3 PvP arena 2 weeks into the league, and you're just like, what? Why does this have an announcement? I mean, come on. We want the delves, dude. Gimme. What kind of damage is the darkness? How does it stack? It's its own damage type. Only defenses that reduce all damage can reduce darkness damage. It stacks up twice a second and can get very dangerous quickly. I think they're gonna change this. Only defense that reduces all damage can reduce darkness damage? I think they're gonna change this. But maybe. I'm surprised. I thought it's gonna be its own type and non-mitigatable, but yeah, that's a bit of a yikes. Kitsugi business slot. Does light radius on items affect your experience in the mine? Also, no. Fuck Kitsugi. Is the darkness resistance only available through the upgraded panels, or can you get it on item mods? It only comes from the upgrade panel. Man, I really wish they would clarify, like, how much can we do with this stuff? I mean, it's an infinitely scaling dungeon, so you would imagine that these things are infinitely scaling too. Otherwise, what's the point of getting the Azurite later on, other than flares and dynamite, which can't be that expensive, but maybe they get more expensive the more upgrades you have in them or something? Shit, I don't know. That'd be kind of punishing. How does darkness affect minions and totems? It does not. I disagree with this, man. I feel like people are gonna make up some cheese. Like, come on, you can cheese so much stuff with this, dude. I mean, I really don't know how it's going to be, because again, as I've talked before, they can take different approaches, right? They can take the PoE approach, which is throw your face at difficult stuff until you get one shot, which is basically what a race to 100 is, or leveling to 100 in general, at least in hardcore, where, you know, some of the time you're gonna do great and you're gonna hit 100, some of the time you're absolutely going to get completely demolished. And the difficulty of the content is somewhat the same, but by having the mobs hit harder slightly, and maybe having more mechanics, there's a higher probability of you dying, therefore there's a lower probability that you're going to be making further down. Or they can take the Diablo 3 approach, which is everything just becomes insanely tanky and it hits you for 1,000,000 damage and you gotta use immunities and all this sort of stuff. And the fact that they're reworking Pathfinder kind of highlights that probably they're a little bit afraid of people being immune to damage in general. Yeah, so it really depends how they approach it, but still, I can imagine it would be absolute cancer to play with minions and totems while they would take full damage, but maybe less damage, you know? But nothing? Seems quite cheesable. I mean, the cart is moving, but the cart doesn't move if you're standing in a flare, right? If you're somewhere to the side, the cart is escorting you, you're not the one escorting the cart. So what if there's like a side thing? Let's say I'm fighting a big boy, and the big boy is kicking my ass, and the cart, well, the cart's moving too fast, I can't keep up. I throw a flare to the side, I run on over to that flare, The mobs, some of them come over, but some of them stick around the cart, and now the cart isn't moving. I'm standing in the flare to the side, and I can freely use my minions to control them all around the borders of my screen, even a screen and a half, because they can off-screen while you're not even looking, and kill off whatever is, you know, dangerous, right? So I don't know. This is a little bit spooky, and I'm a little afraid. I'm a little afraid, but hopefully it's just not gonna be the case. And maybe the AI of like the engaging monsters is just better, and they're gonna react better to that sort of stuff. And yeah, who knows? Maybe it won't be a clusterfuck of unkillable mobs. Maybe again it will be just hard-hitting things that will have a higher probability of killing you. So we're going to be seeing people who... It's not gonna be like in D3 where you've got this one guy that's on Delve 131, and then there's other guys on Delve 131 also, but he's 2 seconds behind, and they're just trying to constantly get over the other guy by running them over and over and finally getting a good delve and progressing further. It's gonna be more like this guy's on 131, but then the next guy is 145, and he actually like died and there's no recovery. The only problem for that is that that's a good system for hardcore, but not so much for softcore. For softcore, the slight progressions of like very tanky monsters, very hard-hitting monsters is better, and I think they should balance around softcore. So yeah, it's gonna be tricky. Does the scaling of the mine apply to specters? Can we summon high-level specters as we get deeper into the mine? The specters are the level corresponding to the depth you entered the mine at. You can summon high-level specters from the mine, right? That answered nothing, because we don't know what do they scale. How far do they scale? Do we have buffs for them? Do we what? How do the mobs in the mine scale? If they're very deep, do they get a buff, or are the mobs just more powerful? Like, I don't know. The relics that can be found in the Time Worn Reliquary are shiny versions of any unique item that were available in the past Path of Exile leagues that aren't in the main unique drop pool, like Headhunter. All 151 have equal chance of being in the Reliquary. Okay, this is a weird answer, because they say have more valuable results. I can imagine a couple legacy items that are quite valuable. Yeah, but obviously the big thing is all 151 have equal chances of being in the Reliquary, which increases, well, probably, actually, we don't really know. I would imagine it increases the probability of you getting something good out of Reliquary keys as compared to the old Reliquary keys that were in Legacy, because those obviously were based off of the rarity of the item more than anything. Actually, this increases the chances of getting like interesting T1 stuff, but decreases the chances of getting something like Headhunter that actually isn't a T1 item. So any items dropped from monsters within a large radius around the crawler, and apparently this radius scales with light radius, right? So do keep that in mind. The more light radius you've got from the crawler, not your own light radius, but the upgraded one with Azurite, the further the items will be picked up. You're not escorting the crawler, it's escorting you. Except it moves ahead of us, which is kind of spooky. Crawler is kind of a dick, if you ask me. But it's interesting that they mention if you use a Quicksilver Flask, that speed increases. So maybe sometimes you want to be in a situation where you're like, well, my Quicksilver Flask has warding, so curse removal, and I just got cursed. But I'm being left behind here. These guys are really messing with me real bad. I gotta use my Quicksilver to get rid of this vulnerability. But then if you click it, then the card speeds up? Is that really how it works? Or is it proportional to like your position? Maybe if you're like in the middle of it, are you really going to be fucking yourself over? Let me just remove this vul and the card goes whee! You know, if you're using some Alchemist Quicksilver Flask, that's gonna make a pretty big of a difference. Not to mention the sort of punishment that you're going to be inflicting on Queen of the Forest builds that, you know, a Stibnite, a Jade, a Quicksilver, that's just gonna really hurt you potentially. So It's an interesting approach. I'm a little worried that people are just gonna go like 5 billion movement speed and just zoom through the entire delve, get to the end, and then, hey, I got a record speed or whatever. Like, I'm a little worried, you know? I think it definitely makes it more spicy, and it's by itself a little bit of a catch-up mechanic, but yeah, I hope it's just not gonna be cheesable, you know? But I'm sure they've thought about this. Come on. Alright, interesting. Cool. Some answers, some bullshit. But for the most part, answers. And the more we know, the better. Incursion was a successful league. Agreed. We enjoyed developing it and creating strong thematic and mechanical links to Sacrifice of the Vault. Very cool. I didn't develop it, but I enjoyed the aspects of that also. Absolutely. Players enjoyed the content, the items, and the corruptions. Oh yeah. For the items, the content, the corruptions, the items, maybe a little bit too much credit there. The main negative we heard was that the players wanted it to progress more, or to have an advanced version, or an even larger ultimate fight. Well, yeah, because you guys kind of said that you're going to be adding all these rooms and expanding upon it, and what's being released right now is going to be continuously worked on throughout the entirety of the league. And then kind of none of that really happened, except getting released 2 rooms that really weren't particularly interesting, nor were they beneficial. Some might even say that they were detrimental to the overall progression through the temple, and many have highlighted very cool ideas, which I'm sure you're going to be taking on board for this stuff, as it has been a interesting league. Like, for instance, the way you approach architects, or the way you upgrade your temple, will have a more deterministic way of finding specific unique or rare items, and also will interact a lot more with the ultimate boss fight, right? So I think a lot of people were expecting that. Due to the league being such a success, we have worked out a plan to add it to the core game. This will be included in December's 3.5 update, not in September's Delve release. So I've already seen this, but I was a little bit surprised, but in a positive way. They're doing this for the first time ever, which is really cool, at least in such an apparent way, because obviously they've done things where they've created a league or created a mechanic and didn't really put it in the game until further down the line. I like it. I like it because I think we need a break from Incursion. I think people enjoyed the league. I think the league worked great, but it was a little bit much, and whenever you were just running it, you always needed to do incursions realistically because they're just that efficient. So whenever you wouldn't, you'd feel a little bit silly, you know? People started skipping out on a large chunk of the temple eventually, only progressing to the better rooms, but still incursions a little bit too rewarding not to run, but also after a while not that fun. And the biggest thing being difficulty. I think the difficulty of it was fun, but also locking you into like a certain playstyle because it's indoor, and then that further, you know, sits on the whole indoor map meta thing. And yeah, it's just more or less the same as just running mappers in that way. Aside from the difficulty, which again I thought they really nailed. Like, the difficulty was really cool. Although the architects initially felt a little bit scarier, and I thought that was good. Eventually they nerfed a bunch of them and never really reworked that entire aspect. So unless you had like a little bit underpowered build, you would rarely see mechanics, which I thought were really cool. And all the abilities that they were using were really cool too. The corruption mods introduced alongside Incursion will remain as Volorb outcomes, but you may need to wait until 3.5 for a reliable way to double corrupt items. I think that's fair. I think the new Volorb stuff is really cool. It definitely... It's just so much better because there's everything for everybody, but at the same time it's like a lower probability of you actually hitting it. And yeah, more of these sort of super simple but big chase items at the end of the day. I like it. And I think it fits well with Delve too. I think this is really fair. I thought, yeah, it was pretty much a guarantee with the success of Delve that it's going to be added into the game, and I'm positively surprised that they're adding it at a later date with hopefully a little bit more polish. Yeet.